I'm Lauren Hayden. I am a research fellow with the Australian Internet Observatory.
Yes,
my colleague.
I am Kellie Vella. I am also a research fellow with the AIO.
And we also have Michael, who is presenting tomorrow, a bit more about the techniques and tools of the AIO. Yeah.
Obviously, here's us, here's all our partners. I don't know how much you've actually gone through the background of the AIO yet, not much. As a SICSS, it's a national research infrastructure project, and the aim is to basically make the digital world more observable. So we're doing that in a few different ways, developing training resources, developing the tools and the infrastructure so that you can set up your project and collect your data and hopefully make sense of it. And of course, because the digital platforms have got particular challenges, changing infrastructure, it's quite ephemeral, and it's a bit of a black box as well, particularly I think with DDPs, but we're going to dig into that more and hopefully make it a little bit more understandable. Straight up, it's going to go back to Lauren. What is data donation?
Yes, what is data donation? So data donation is a sort of emerging method, like Bogdan mentioned, to help us study digital platforms that are personalized, opaque, ephemeral, right? When you're scrolling on your Instagram feed, once you scroll past something, it's kind of gone forever, and it never appears in your feed again in the exact same order and in the exact same way that you saw it before. And then, of course, each individual user has their own version of that feed. So we never really experience digital platforms all in the same way. So how can we start to actually examine the experience of using digital platforms, whether it's social media or other kinds of digital services that we use in everyday life? And well, we're proposing that one way to do that is this method of data donation. So the idea is that platform users can donate their data to a research project from digital platforms using some computational tools that we're developing in the AIO. As Bogdan mentioned, this idea of data donation has already started to take off over in Europe. It's become quite popular because of provisions like the GDPR, which mandates that digital platforms provide their users with access to their own data, right? So the information that you put on digital platforms, it's required that you have access to them in a legible format and a portable format. We'll talk more about that. But when I say data donation, I'm really referring to kind of two sorts of methods that we're thinking about in the AIO. And the first method is called data download packages, or DDPs. And a DDP is this sort of personal data archive that platforms make available to their users to export. So we'll get more specific in what that means, but maybe you've seen this before on social media or other kinds of platforms where you can kind of go into the settings and elect to or request to export all of the things you've posted before, right? Or all of the data the platform has about you. So that's what we mean when we're talking about a DDP. And another way that we're thinking about data donation is this idea of screen capture. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Do you want to give a preview about screen capture?
Oh, I don't know how much I'm going to give away, but basically with screen capture, we're talking about observability. So if you can imagine someone watching what is on the screen that the participant is viewing as well. So unlike DDPs, which are a capture of a person's history on a platform up to the point that that account data is downloaded, screen capture really captures from that point onwards. So for perhaps a very discrete period of time. And so there are lots of different methods used to collect that. We've got the Ad Observatory's mobile ad toolkit, which is tuned to collect advertising data. So it has been trained through machine vision techniques, to determine what is an ad and to only capture that. And we're looking at expanding that basically to collect other types of visual data.
So yes, more detail. What is actually a DDP? So as I said, emerging method is where you can export your data from social media platforms. It's kind of this personal data archive, and it can include a whole range of data depending on the platform. So it could include things like your account information, such as the date you made that account, or I think even Instagram provides the last time you changed your password, for example. So things like that, as well as other interactions you've had with the platform, things you've searched for, things you've liked, things you've watched, that type of thing. And occasionally some platforms are better at this than others, but they do provide some limited sort of inferred data, such as how are you being targeted by advertisers, what company is targeting you, what ads have you seen, these sorts of platform records. But we'll go through some examples as well. And so you can request these personal DDPs through your account settings on most platforms. And later in this workshop, we'll have a session about trying to figure out how to actually do that and request those DDPs. So we'll talk about that in a little while. So here's just an example with Instagram. This beautiful diagram was made by one of our colleagues at the AIO, Fatoon. She has an incredible eye for detail because I have not had the patience to make this. But basically, she requested a Instagram DDP and then mapped out this schema of all of the data that is included in the DDP. So these colored boxes at the top, you can kind of see those are the folders. So what happens when you get your DDP? It comes as a zip file. You can download that onto your computer. If you unzip that file, you will see 5 folders with these sort of headers. And in each folder, there will be a file that is related to each of these white boxes. So device information, login activity, these sorts of things. And then within each file, there will be actual variables, fields, values of that data reporting back. So you can see already, even just for Instagram, that it is quite a large file and quite a complex piece of data, very rich, a lot to dig into there. And I suppose one other thing I should say straight from the beginning is that because this is a artifact that's provided by the platforms, they are subject to change at really any time. And platforms are constantly changing the folder structure and the available data within these files. I think Michael, Kellie, and I have been kind of working quite intensely with these files for over a year now. And I will say they have, Instagram, for example, has changed the folder structure a couple of times. And yeah, so that's a little bit of a risk, but we'll talk about how to handle that as well in this session.
Oh, yeah. So this is pretty brief because we're going to not spend a lot of time on it today. I believe there's a session on, is it Thursday? Thursday, where you can dig into screen capture a little bit more. But I will say that, what shall I say? Yeah, at the moment, the AIO is looking to expand screen capture to capture political videos. So as a next step, part of the training involved with that will involve machine learning to capture, identify particular actors. So each sort of project, each project's aims, their research questions is going to shape the way that screen capture is rolled out. There are a lot of questions that have come across. People are wanting to link, what people are saying to particular actions that are performed, what is on the screen before the thing that is, the context that an item of question is appearing within. And all of those sort of raise different sort of questions around, well, am I then capturing personalized data, sensitive data? So each sort of wave of development is going to come with its own challenges. But yeah, in terms of the pros of using this, though, once you have something installed, and at the moment we're looking at an app, later it may end up being, browser extensions as well. Once the participant has that installed, it's a very low burden. The burden with DDPs, I don't know if you want to talk about that. I can talk about that now, is a little bit more extensive because of the time that it takes for a platform to assemble that DDP. So there is a point where the participant will be asked to go away, request it, wait for it to come back, and then bring it back to the platform for upload. So with screen capture, you don't really have that. You have this sort of one and done. I've installed this. I will get prompts about, capturing something or not. So there are pros and cons with both approaches, is all I'm trying to say. Yeah.
We'll keep going. Yes, so the real value of data donation as a method is that it helps us get into this user-centric kind of view of people's platform experience. So I'm sure many of you are maybe familiar with API access or web scraping. I see some nods of heads. So when we think about APIs or web scraping, that provides a platform view, right? You're kind of scraping maybe all of the posts related to a hashtag, or you're scraping all of the ads related to a particular advertiser. But that doesn't tell us who actually saw these posts or ads, or how do they fit in with the context of the feed. So with data donation, instead of getting that platform-centric view, we get a user-centric view, right? Because each participant is donating their individual data. And so these are some examples of real research questions that Kellie and I have found from data donation projects where people have asked participants to download and donate various parts of their platform data. So for example, this top one, how do small news websites fit into the diversity of people's online media diets? Or the second, how many users engaged in binge watching? In that study, this second study, they actually asked people to provide their Netflix viewing history, and that's how they computed binge watching and computed these sort of like long watching sessions. So, you can make this kind of inference from DDP data. And then in this bottom study, this actually came out of the Australian Ad Observatory, how are Australians targeted with unhealthy food advertising on social media? So getting people to donate the ads that they saw from Facebook using a mobile app or browser extension like Kellie was explaining to see, how many ads do people see that are related to unhealthy food, this kind of thing. So you can get a sense of how this is a participant-centric approach, right? This is all about what people experience rather than just what's available on the platform. So again, just kind of to set up that compare and contrast of data donation versus something like APIs or web scraping. Data donation, one of the strengths here is that we can access data that's not normally available by scraping, right? Because we're seeing how it actually appeared in the feed or what people actually posted about. A strength of data donation is that because it is a participant-centric approach, we are actually getting people to participate in our research. They're providing consent to share that data, and they are reviewing the data before they donate it to us. So it's a very engaged and collaborative kind of process with participants. And because of that, it can actually help participants learn more about how digital platforms work. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the studies that we've done so far and the sort of feedback that we've gotten from participants in saying like, oh, I didn't know that Facebook kept my history for all this time, right? It's when you think about digital platforms all the time, you're like, of course they are, but for the everyday user, that might not be the case. The real risk here with data donation is that DDPs in particular can contain very personal or sensitive data. If you think back to that Instagram diagram I had up before, it includes things like who you might follow or who might follow you. So that could have the names of your friends or family members. That's not ideal to donate. And we also need to consider the participant burden. And that's kind of what Kellie was starting to talk about just a couple slides ago, is that, when you're asking someone to download this massive file and look through it and say, okay, are you happy to share that with me? That is kind of a big ask. And hopefully with some of the tools and platforms that we're developing at the AIO, we can mitigate some of that burden and the risk of personal identification as well. So you'll see some of those tools coming up. And obviously,
API and web scraping still totally has a place, appropriate research questions for that as well. And I think, there's an opportunity to really meaningfully combine these two methods even, where you can get that platform-centric view and that user-centric view together. So that's also a possibility, is combining methods. And we will also talk more about that. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but we will. The time will come. We will talk about it. Oh, it's right now. Wow, we did make these slides. I should know what's in them. So as I was saying, you can combine data donation with other types of methods. You could ask people to donate their data and also survey them about their habits. You could interview them and use their DDP as a sort of elicitation tool. That's something we did in this study, which was a pilot study done in 2024 about alcohol and gambling advertising. And I'll provide some detail about that. You could combine with APIs and scraping. Really, any method that's already in your toolkit, data donation could complement. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for some good creative methodological development in this space. So in this pilot study that we did in 2024, we were interested in how people in Australia were targeted by alcohol and gambling companies on Facebook. And we asked people to use a screen capture mobile app, which captured their Facebook ads and only the ads. So it used some very fancy machine vision techniques to crop out their advertising and throw away all of the personal information. And then we also had them download their Facebook data download package, the DDP. In the Facebook DDP, it actually provides you with a list of all of the advertisers who are targeting your account. So we had these participants provide us with that list, and we were able to kind of start to think about, okay, well, some people saw a lot of alcohol advertising. Many of them were targeted by alcohol-related advertisers or gambling-related advertisers, and also just get an understanding of how advertisers are targeting Facebook accounts using different techniques. So another case where we can sort of triangulate through this data to find some novel insights. And in this study as well, we actually did interview our participants after they used the mobile app for 1 week. So we collected their ads for a 1 week period, and then they joined us in a Zoom interview, and we looked at all the ads together and got them talking about, why did you see this? Does this make sense to you? How does this fit into your life in that context? So it was a really rich way to talk about people's experience using Facebook and the ads that they saw. Just some more examples of combined methods. So how do users engage with recommended videos on TikTok? This was a study also from 2024 where they got their TikTok viewing history and combined, used the TikTok API to sort of enrich that viewing history.
I'll just
add, jump in.
Oh yeah, just one thing there, because it kind of points out some of the limitations and strengths of these methods. The DDP was showing the time people started watching a video, but not the duration. So they couldn't infer how much of those videos were actually watched. So they scraped the duration from using the API, and then they inferred using the start times of all these videos, how much of that, watching actually occurred. So it's just a way of filling in the gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And using those combined methods. And then, as a second example, more in the news and journalism space, how do social media users manage exposure to news? They used Instagram and TikTok data donations, and again, sat down with their participants to interview them about the sort of news that they saw and who was actually providing that news, like news sources. So yeah, also very interesting studies. We can send around a reading list if anyone's interested. Okay, so that was a very rapid fire introduction to data donation, but probably enough of me talking, I think, to start off. So we thought that we would just get everyone to either work at their tables or independently and just have a chat about, or a brainstorm, if you will, about where you might be interested getting some DDPs from.
Yeah, I made this slide because I noticed that every time people think about DDPs, they think about social media. But try to broaden your mind around what that actually means, because there are DDPs being produced by, productivity tools, most major shopping platforms, a lot of learning tools, entertainment, health and fitness. All of that data is available, and that data could also be combined as well. So those are just very few examples. I think it's best to be sort of led by your questions and then look for the platform.
Yes, and so I think the added layer of challenge here is find some platforms you might be interested in, whether they have DDPs, and then figure out how they can be accessed. How do you download them? How do we find those DDPs?
Yeah, and
that's the challenge.
It's quite different platform to platform as well. Some of these platforms have really integrated it and made it quite easy and very detailed in terms of what you can download. I think Meta for Facebook and Instagram, you can go to the One Account Center. You can, basically go to each one, and you can be quite detailed in terms of what you are asking the users to download. But then, for example, Discord, you go there and you can have to download everything. That's it. All of it gets downloaded. And I think some of these sites, maybe some of the more obscure ones, you're actually asking people to write an email to the platform. So some of them have really integrated it well so that participants can get their data out quickly and very specifically, and others less so.
Mm-hmm. So we'll take 10 minutes to sort of do that, and then maybe we'll have a share. Is there any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I saw.
Thank you so much. And you might have already covered this, but I was wondering, there are some projects working in this space. And so would it then be possible to reuse that data collected by researchers? How do you approach this? Just really curious about, whether there might be something more than just to support one project.
You want to?
No, go.
Oh, okay.
You're excited.
Oh no, not that excited. I think in terms of how the AIO is going to be handling this kind of research is going to be project by project. So we're not will, I guess, act as a sort of inventory, so that people who have got extended levels of consent to reuse their data for other projects would be contactable. But really, this isn't that much different to what universities also provide in a lot of their research management systems. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not I think you should treat it as any other research project, but we might try to assist in surfacing some of that.
Yeah, I know some projects who are working in this space have plans to publish their data, an anonymized data set, but I think it's very specific to what's collected as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think anonymized data is sort of quite possible, but yeah. Any other questions? Nothing?
Okay. Well, we'll take 10 minutes, just brainstorm some platforms you might be interested in and see if you can find how to get a DDP. Okay, that was a quick 10 minutes. And I think we have another activity right now. I lost the clicker. We'll just keep it rolling, keep this good energy rolling. And so now I guess we just wanted to give an opportunity to think about what sort of research questions you've been thinking about, platforms that you could get DDPs from. What sort of research questions could we actually ask of these data files? And so we'll take another 10 minutes to write a research question that could be answered with DDP donation of a platform of your choosing. And if you would like some better insight into what kind of data might actually be available in Facebook or Instagram DDPs, we have a tool for that. Thanks to Michael. It is at this link. It is called the Schema Explorer.
Do you want me to try and get it up?
Yes.
On the screen?
Give us a demo, Kelly.
I'll try. Just be 1 second.
The Schema Explorer is a visual, user-friendly way of seeing what data is delivered in these DDPs. It's a lot easier than looking at 50 JSON files. Perfect. So as I said, the DDPs are subject to change and the platforms do periodically update or make changes to them. And so this tool is a sort of static picture of what is available. So it may not be exact, but it gives you a really good idea of the sorts of variables that we're thinking about. So you're more than welcome. That's the link there right at the top.
Yeah. I'll just point out a few things with it too. So I don't know if you've noticed at the top, we've got Facebook and Instagram. They're both selected. You can deselect one if you just want to focus on the one platform. If you click any of those, it'll drop down and give you an idea of what are in the folders. Or you can, combine the two, whatever, it'll give you a sense. The other thing you can do is you can search the fields, and I'm really fond of searching for timestamp because it's in almost every folder, and that will give you a sense of how to potentially link things on a chronology of events. And of course, you've got, maybe that's around location or behaviors and activities. Here, you've got all those folders you can drop into. So that's showing you've got like one file, basically, which will have within groups you visited, which has a timestamp. So that's basically it. But have a quick look at it now, if you can, on your own devices.
And we welcome feedback as well.
Yes.
And compliments.
Yeah, praise.
Yes, praise. That's all Kelly. I think it's a good practice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, quick 10 minutes. Have a look at that, and we'll be back.
Yeah. I'll get out of this. Okay, can you all hear me, by the way? Is that better? We might roll along. Let's see. I'm just going to give this is going to be a quick overview on ethics. I know you've just sort of handled some stuff in the previous section, but this is going to deal, I think, more directly with these methods. And I had some great questions before around scraping, so I think we'll hopefully get to cover that as well. Okay, so you're all PhD students, I'm assuming, not all of you, but a lot of you, yeah? So has anyone got to the point of putting together the first ethics application for their studies yet? A few people? So you understand a little bit what some of the hurdles are. I just conducted some research actually with a bunch of HAS researchers to see what are their challenges. And the main one, it seemed to be, was ethical approvals, getting this across the line with the kind of research methods that you want to use. But I'm going to cover this pretty quickly. Obviously, the kind of things that we want to prioritize are around, I think in particular with participant-centric research, is that sort of care and forethought about what is the participant experience. But the other, I guess, elephant in the room is that the kind of research that we carry out does also have an impact on the kind of trust in institutions and the environment of trust in institutions, which we're seeing a decline in currently. And we have some, obviously extra obligations as researchers around, ethical and legal, et cetera, compliance that industry just doesn't have. I don't know if anyone recognizes that logo. It should be pretty famous for like the media and comms people in the room. Oh no, terrible choice. Cambridge Analytica. So this is there's the start of the decline in trust in institutions, and particularly research in, I think, on digital platforms that researchers have to contend with. For participant-centric research, you really have to get over a lot of hesitancies and issues with trust in handing over that type of data. So we're going to talk through some of that. For this kind of research, I think a lot of it will fall around ideas of consent and privacy or anonymization, de-anonymization. and data minimization, which we'll talk about also. And that sort of varies across the different types of methods that you might use. So with APIs and scraping, which I know a few of you are already familiar with, consent isn't directed towards, if you're asking for consent, it's never directed towards the actual people that you're scraping that information from. But you can actually consider the platform owners, and I really would recommend that. And obviously being across things like terms of service, and trying to go that extra step, I think, in terms of contacting site owners. Again, with APIs and scraping, it's about avoiding collecting personally identifiable information, which, for example, might be quite difficult if you're scraping from private groups. And if you're talking about that sort of private versus public, even within public where you're seeing sort of like publicly facing comments or posting, people aren't necessarily thinking that that's going to be used for research. So that is a consideration. And similarly, with data minimization, it's extracting only what you need. But part of that is about respecting the infrastructure so that you're not crashing websites. And it's very similar with participant-centric data donation, though we're trying to find ways that we can give participants some choice around what they share with us. And that can be really difficult, particularly when you have very long, say, DDPs. How do people actually understand what's in a DDP? It has implications for data literacy and also incentivization and the ways that you sort of manage projects and manage participants. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. There's also questions around, does this data contain, data from other people other than my participants? We're talking about things like, group photos or conversations. And this is really rich data. I'm not saying you can't collect it. I mean, absolutely. If that's where your research is aimed, then there are ways to get that data. And also data linking, and particularly when you're combining methods like data donation or scraping from another site, you can very quickly identify someone that might have been unidentifiable in one data set. And again, ask only for what you need. So yeah, I think I mentioned some of that around linked methods. Identity management is really interesting. So if you're hoping to collect data for a small qualitative study where you're going to interview them, then obviously they're going to need to be identified and identifiable at some point, but they might want to have their data itself de-identified. So there's questions around how are you going to manage identities. And this is something that AIO is sort of providing some tools for. So say the ability to give your participants a code and keep them de-identified through the whole process, or collecting their email address because you really need to get them in for an interview at some point in the future. There are different ways that you can go about it. And this is something that your ethics boards are going to be very interested in as well. Incentivization is going to be very important, particularly I think with DDPs, because there is a little bit more participant burden. There's the opportunity for dropout. And that's certainly something a lot of studies are experiencing, like quite a high attrition rate. And how you incentivize is very diverse. I know that there was a study that gave monetary incentives, and they very quickly found a lot of false submissions, something where a DDP was submitted one day, the person went back onto their account, changed it slightly, downloaded it again the next day. And so a lot of wasted time and effort for the researcher in terms of cleaning that data up, and a lot of wasted money as well. But there are other ways to incentivize it, and I'm going to talk through that towards the end. And those mostly fall around adding value to the whole process. There is a very clear, this is very practical, but I think it's worth mentioning that you need to have extremely clear instructions when you're asking people to download DDPs, having things like screenshots, and emphasizing that you want them to download the JSON file, not the HTML file, which is often the first thing that they're presented with, and sending out reminders for them to come back and actually submit it, because sometimes it's only a few hours, but sometimes it's days, sometimes it's weeks. It really just depends on what you're asking from people. And actually, that's where data minimization is really useful. If you're only asking for exactly what you need, and you're lucky enough that your platform will allow the participants to just download exactly what they need, then that sort of processing time is diminished as well. So this is a framework. I think this was used with is it DMRS? I can't remember the name of that platform. Port. Oh, it was Port. So the idea was that you would ask your participants to go away. They would go and get their digital trace data. They would view it and explore it on their own device. They would, using local signal processing, they would go, yes, this is okay. I choose to select this, this, and this to share. And then it is uploaded to the researcher. So this is very much the process that we're using with the AIO. And Michael's going to run you through some of that tomorrow, I believe. So, yeah. I just wanted to bring this study up because I think it's Alejandra Gomez Ortega is doing some really great work in the space of, sorry. Thank you. Hello. She's looking at the participant experience of downloading and uploading DDPs. So you can learn a lot from having a look at some of her papers. This is a study she did with Google Assistant data, which was all voice transcripts, so incredibly sensitive data, 22 donors. And she was really interested in how data literacy was built through the whole process. And she explicitly tried to build that so that it was sort of built into her consent processes. So she developed all of these interactive visualizations, word clouds, lots of, outtakes and interactive graphs. And it was like quite a lot of effort, actually. But she was doing like a very tight qualitative study. So what she learnt was that informed consent can be considered as, you can aim for adequate. It doesn't have to be perfect. But the consent but in that process of becoming informed does take time. It is perhaps going to extend beyond the point at which someone checks a box and goes, I consent or I upload. It's incremental. But the more that people learnt and knew about their data, the more that they were interested in the research. They gained a lot of trust for the researcher. And so that sort of process, I think, is sort of worth considering, even if it's just like a scaled back version of that, where the incentive is participant learning about their own DDPs. And yeah, data literacy also changes the relationship between those participants and those platforms. And she's got some great quotes that she picked up from her participants, that they started to think that Google was a stalker. And they were not aware of just how much data was being collected on them and these voice transcripts. And yeah, I think that last one's like, if someone's got a startup idea, I think that's a killer. I would absolutely be paying someone to go and explore, what do I look like from a platform's perspective? Yeah, these are just a few other studies to consider. These people were working with, again, very highly sensitive data. It was conversational data, and some of it was quite highly traumatizing. I think they worked with trauma-informed design. It was about dating sexual violence. So it basically is sensitive as it gets. And they developed some really novel tools. I'm not saying you have to do this, but they developed a chatbot that would guide people through the exploration of their data. And then that formed, again, the data set that they were looking at. I've also heard of people, other researchers, to try and get around this idea of, what has someone else said in this conversation, because they're not consenting to share their data. So then they've asked their participants to paraphrase or to basically sidestep around that whole problem. There are other ways to get around it. I know that we're going to be considering things like anonymization. But yeah, there are ways, basically, there are always ways, I think, that you can get the ethical approval and conduct ethical research, even with very highly sensitive data. And also coming back to APIs and scraping, I'm also aware of ethics boards considering waivers of consent for that, when obviously there is a justification for it. And those are all sort of outlined, I think, in HMLC guidelines. Yeah, okay. We ripped through that. So we might take a moment here. Once you consider the studies, because I heard some really great ones coming from around the room, to consider what other methods you might use. If you're going to use DDPs, what other methods in combination with that? How would you manage your participants? Are they going to be anonymized? Do they need to be anonymized? How are you going to manage communications with them? How are you going to manage, if they want to withdraw their data as well? What platforms are you going to be targeting? I really recommend having a look at the data, the Schema Explorer, if those are the two that you're interested in. But do use ChatGPT if you don't have one in mind, because we're going to do in the next exercise, we might get you to download that. And ChatGPT is like very easy and quick download. And you get some really interesting textual data out of it. Yeah, let's go. Hear me? Yes. Okay, great. We might keep moving. Hey, there were some really great questions in the room. I had a good one before about collecting data internationally, and yeah, it's interesting. So the AIO at this point is considering only storing data within Australia. So that's a consideration, I guess, if you're collecting data from other countries and whether they have an expectation that that data would be stored in the country of collection. Did you pick up anything when you were walking around? No? Oh, that's all right. Well, any questions from that activity? Any outstanding issues? Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so one question that came up, and we had an interesting conversation about it, was some of the limitations with respect to connections, right? Because any information on users who donate data are going to be limited by the amount of connections they actually have, right? So we were kind of just curious about some ways to resolve that issue, right? Because if that's the case, then you might have one person with maybe 2 connections, 2 followers, one person with 70, one person with 1 million followers, right? So there's some variety and variation within the network itself, right? So are there any particularly good, useful ways to simplify that data if we're interested in how information gets spread, or how people interact with others on social networks?
Sorry, what was your research question?
We're still working on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds like a great research question. And I don't know if anyone has really resolved that in a DDP study. There is some emerging research coming from the Netherlands where they've done WhatsApp data donation with group chats, for example, and they've used anonymized group chats where each user is assigned an ID. So they don't know who the person is, but they're able to sort of see those interactions between people, as well as, how many members are in the group, what is the sort of distribution of group participation. So in terms of social media and followers, I can't think of any particular study that's necessarily concerned with that question, but I think it's a great one, and certainly something that people are thinking about in terms of the potential of DDPs. And that could also be something you might combine with a scraping example as well, to start to think about those network effects and how information gets amplified out.
Yeah, and this might be super obvious, but you can just think of your participant group as well in terms of who you're screening in or screening out, to narrow that a little bit. Any other points or questions?
A race.
Just a really random question. So great all around, but the WhatsApp and other Discord, for example, that would inevitably involve private messages between multiple parties, right?
Yeah.
And you would assume that those are encrypted and therefore private. So I can understand downloading the DDP from the user for the messages they've sent, but would you not also need to get consent from every party that sent to them?
Yeah. This is the major stumbling block for people who are interested in collecting that type of data. So a few different ways around it. I think you provided a really good example before of if you're working with particular participants to ask them to read out or paraphrase what's going on so that you're getting that explanation from their point of view rather than actually reading it from the DDP yourself. But also, there are tools out there that will anonymize that data as well. And I know that the AIO is looking at doing that also. But yeah, it is something that we need to solve because I think that's where there's like there's a lot of very important research questions that need to be answered by the kind of data that you find in conversations in private groups.
And I can't remember exactly, but I think some platforms will provide you with both sides of the chat. So like for Instagram, I think you could download messages that you received and the ones you sent, right? And then clearly when it comes to the point of donation, we would have to have some kind of anonymization process because a lot of researchers are not interested in collecting the contents of direct messages for good reason. But there's a number of studies that are going on where they do use computational approaches to anonymize at the point of donation. Is that your question? Like whether the platform delivers both half of the chats?
Oh yeah, it's not there.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've certainly changed my privacy settings a lot since I started working on this project. Okay, we might move along. Here we come to it. I think the best way to look at DDPs is to look at your own DDP. So, but considering, I guess, your research question, if you have an account with the platform that you're interested in, go to that one. If you don't use ChatGPT, just because it's quite quick and you can get some data out. And actually, I think it might be good to do ChatGPT anyway as a fallback for tomorrow's activity. Is that right? We've got sample data for that. Yeah. Anyway, have a look. You might need to Google if you're looking for something obscure, but generally speaking, you just go to the platform, go into the settings and the privacy settings, and that's where you'll find it. We'll walk around.
Yeah, so in tomorrow's session with Michael and our colleague Dan is going to provide a hands-on demo of some of the tools that we've built with the AIO, which you can explore with your own file. I guess it's worth saying now that none of that data will actually get transmitted anywhere. When you use the platform, you can explore the files without downloading, and that's all processed locally in your own browser. So that's the plan for tomorrow. So it is a lot more fun if you have your own data.
It is. And it's like a good way to understand the participant burden by doing this yourself.
Thanks for having us.
If you want to sign up to the mailing list, use that QR code or follow us on LinkedIn.